Islam, our divine and national movement, stand for the Pacific grand principles of love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice. And the Prophet Noble Jew Ali am applying to all loyal, faithful Moors members and the American citizens to help him in his great uplifting acts of uplifting fallen humanity among the Asiatic race and nation. For he has suffered much and severely in the past through misunderstanding of what the movement is dedicated to. It is the great God Allah alone that guides the destiny of this divine and national movement. I know that all true American citizens are identified by national and national decent names in order to answer and apply to the free national constitution of this free national republic of the United States of America. The Prophet Noble Jew Ali is going to help this national government. For without a free national name with the decent flag of your forefathers, there is not a national divine title of the government in which you live. This is from your true and divine prophet, Noble Jew Ali. To all Americans and foreign sympathizers, Prophet Noble Jew Ali is the founder. At this time, I'd like to recite the Moorish American prayer, the prayer that connects us back in this era of time to the great God Allah. Allah, the Father of the universe, the Father of love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice. Allah is my protector, my guide, and my salvation by night and by day through his holy prophet, Jew Ali. Amen. First off, I'd like to rise, walking in Jerusalem, just like John, giving praise to Allah, the author, the creator, the governor of the world, almighty, eternal, and incomprehensible, the one who stretches forth the heaven with his hand, who have described with his fingers the courses of the stars, who set his bounds to the ocean that it cannot pass, and said to the stormy winds, be still. I'd like to give on to the lily of the valley, the bright and morning star, talking about none other than our holy and illustrious prophet, Noble Jew Ali. I'd like to give on to Prophet Noble Jew Ali because it was he who reached down into the watery grave of Lucifer, Satan, devil, dragon, and the beast, which are the attributes of hatred, slander, lewdness, murders, theft, and everything that harms and set you and me back upright on our feet again. I'd like to give on to the forerunner to the Prophet Noble Jew Ali, the brother that already had a nationality, Marcus Moses Garvey. I'd like to give on to Marcus Moses Garvey because this brother, he had to have pure thoughts in order to pave the way for love. I'd like to give on to all literature pertaining to Islam in the Moorish Science Temple of America. I'd like to give on to all sheiks and sheikas, friends of distinction, and those that aid and assist us in this, our divine and gigantic mission, the uplifting of fallen humanity. Last but not least, I'd like to give honor to effort because so many of us don't even try. At this time, I'd like to read from the Moorish Holy Quran. This book is known in Revelations as the Book of the Seven Seals. And it says that none was able to open and read from these sacred pages the messages of purity and love. Also, when you look in Genesis and Revelation, you see that this book is also known as the book of the seven seals. Because in this book is your salvation. In this book is your deliverance from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory forever and ever. Amen. So what I want to do right now, I want to read from the Moorish Holy Quran, the book of the seven seals. And the reason why I want to read from this book, because it's important that I do. Because the Holy Prophet Noah Ali, through the guidance of his father, God Allah, brought us this book. It was revealed to him. It's only 5 or 6 chapters in here that Noah Ali brought. But he had to bring it because there's an organization, a European organization, called the Rosicrucian Society. And during this time, the Rosicrucian Society had 2 books in their hand. One of the books that they had in their hand come out of Egypt, known as Untitled Chapter. And another book that come out of Egypt is known as the Quran Gospel. And if Allah would not have seen and sent Noble Jew Ali to redeem us from our sinful ways and to warn us of the great wrath which is sure to come upon the earth, the European nations would have had our Jesus, and having our Jesus, we've been left out in the outside. Because we always hear brothers and sisters talk about the 18 and the 2 sections that's missing, but there was 18 sections, but you see only 2 sections. But today, there's something new. We are talking about the 18 too, but we're getting ready to talk about the 18 years that's missing in your Holy Bible. Because they talk about Jesus when he was 12 years old. And you don't hear no more about him until he was 33. And those 18 years that's missing in your Holy Bible is in your Moorish Quran. And another piece of literature that the prophet left with the group of Moors, because Jew Ali also say that some of his greatest followers was in the church. But he tells us here that the foundation of Christianity began in Rome, and when the Roman nation that founded the first church, of whom crucified Jesus of Nazareth, was seeking to redeem his people from under the Roman yoke and law. So we're going to get some understanding. What Jew Ali means by some of his greatest followers was in the church. But I heard him say one time that he went and got the Cook-Bey brothers out of the church. And the Cook-Bey brothers, along with some few other brothers, is the one that he gave this stuff to because they was in the church, and he went in the church and got them out. So when we say the foundation of Christianity began in Rome, we know it was the Roman nation that founded the first church, of whom crucified Jesus of Nazareth. So when Jew Ali says some of his followers are in the church, we're going to talk about that today. So right now, I want to read from the book of the seven seals. And it's going to be so beautiful that I read from it because I have my Bible right here. And I had the Holy Quran of Mecca right here. And the last time that I was on this show, it was during Easter and Palm Sunday and Ramadan. And we talked in this book about Gog and Magog, which is Japheth, one of Noah's 3 sons. And in this book, though, it said Noah's 3 sons were Shem, Ham, and Japheth. So this is what I want to talk about today. It's very important that I go back into these lessons today because Noah Jew Ali gave it to us. He gave us this because this saved us from the wrath of Allah. I remember in 1928, I hear the old timers always talk about when they had that conference. And the conference had nothing to do with religion. And Noah Jew Ali was the head of the conference, and all of the Canaanites and everybody gave him the mandate to the land. And the reason why they gave Noah Jew Ali the mandate to the land, because right here we have a chapter, chapter 45. And in this chapter 45, it talks about the divine origin of the Asiatic nation. And in this chapter where it talks about the divine origin of the Asiatic nation, it says the Egyptians, who were the Hamathites, and a direct descendant of Mizraim. Now Cush had 4 sons. Cush, Put, Mizraim, and Canaan. So it said Mizraim The seed of Abraham, Hagar, Japanese and Chinese. Now hold that thought. Now let's look down in verse 7. It says the Turks are the true descendants of Hagar. There go Hagar again. Now who is Hagar? Hagar is the Egyptian. Remember Abraham had a wife named Sarah? And Sarah couldn't have children. And he had a handmaid named Hagar the Egyptian. She had a son. The son's name is Ishmael. So we remember in the tapes where the Japanese and the Chinese said that they came from Africa. They said that the cradle of civilization was in Africa. And here, Drew Ali tells us this right here. He tells us about the Turks. He tells us about Hagar. He tells us about the Hindus of India, the descendants of the ancient Canaanite, Hittites, and Moabites. So we're going to start here then. We're going to start with the Moabites. And the reason why I want to start with the Moabites is because I mentioned on my last show that Ward Dean Muhammad, the son of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, he told all of the sisters when he took over the Nation of Islam and told everybody to change their name, he told all of the sisters, if your name is Ruth, keep it. And we know when we talk about Ruth, and we talking about Jesse, we talking about Obed, we talking about King David, we know that all of them came through the womb of Ruth. But guess what the Bible tells us? The Bible tells us there was a brother by the name of Lot. And matter of fact, when I think about Lot, I think about Abraham. Because Abraham had a brother. And his brother's name was Haran. And Haran had a son. And his son's name was Lot. So when you were getting to talk about Hagar, when you were getting to talk about Haran, you talk about Abraham. And Drew Ali tells us that some of the great fathers through which Jesus came are Abraham, Boaz by Ruth, Jesse, King David, Solomon, Hezekiah, and Joseph by Mary. So Master getting ready to speak now. I'm speaking the words of the prophet Noah Drew Ali because we was taught this. The lesson that I'm getting ready to give you right now. All of us back in the 60s and the 70s, before we got our minister papers, we had to stand before the multitudes and teach this lesson. So I want to give you this lesson. I'm going to give you this lesson I don't suppose to because it was given out in the upper room. But I'm going to give it to you because I want you to hear it. They talk about Ruth. They talk about King David. They talk about Saul. But James Stewart, whose name is King James, and James Stewart have a version of the Bible. And in this version of the Bible, when you look at the lesson of they talking about Lot, when he led the people out of Sodom and Gomorrah. And you know, when you talk about Sodom and Gomorrah, you talking about Sodomy, and you talk about Sodomite. And Sodomy and Sodomite is, you know what that is. So we're going to get into this because it's important, because he says in this book that Ruth come from ancestors, because they say that Lot had 2 daughters. I have 2 daughters. And they say that Lot impregnated his 2 daughters. And when Lot impregnated his 2 daughters, the first one to come out, name was Moab. So they said that the Moabite nation came through incest. Now I remember the lesson when they said Ruth died. Ruth's husband died, and they said Ruth become a widow. And I understand that lesson because we learned that too in the Moorish Temple of America, because what made Ruth a widow? Because her husband died. Now it don't have to mean that her husband died of physical death. Because when you're living according to Lucifer, Satan, devil, dragon, and beast, which are the attributes of hatred, slander, lewdness, murder, theft, and everything that harm, then if the man is dead, then the woman becomes a widow. But when you look in that book, they saying that all of us incest. And it don't hurt you, but you got to teach it. And the reason why I'm teaching on this lesson is because I was in a meeting the last 3 or 4 days. Matter of fact, last week too. And I was meeting with some people, and some of them had eels and bays on their name. And they said that we keep talking about Christianity, but Christianity comes through Africa. And it said before there was Christianity anywhere because the Bible comes from Africa. And let me teach you on that because I'm a mastermind. I studied this stuff. My mother had me study. This book did come from Africa. I agree with that. And I agree that they put a name on it and called it Christianity. Because the book said the foundation of Christianity began in Rome. And it was the Roman nations. Now, how can it be in Africa and Rome too? Well, because say the Roman nations founded the first church, of whom crucified Jesus of Nazareth, for seeking to redeem his people from under the Roman yoke and law. So now where did it come from? Did it come from Europe? Because I remember a time when there was no Europe. That's why they talk about the 7 churches that was in Asia. And the reason why we are saying that there were 7 churches in Asia, because at that time, Europe was not even in existence. So we're going to look at this. And we're going to look at this, and we're going to say that, okay, you say that the Bible came out of Africa. And you know why you're saying that? Because those that call themselves Ethiopians. This is why I know what you all said. We're not Negroes, colored, black, or Ethiopian. Because when you begin to talk, I remember Austin Bay before she passed on. She used to tell me that all of the people up 9th Street in Washington, D.C., most of them was Ethiopians. And they would always make it known to the Moors that they was not a part of the slave trade. They said the slave trade did not come through Ethiopia. Now we're talking about the Greeks. We're talking about the Greeks because when you begin to talk about Ethiopia, the word came from the Greeks. They named it Ethiopia because before then it was known as Abyssinia. So now we're going to teach that. So now when you look at the Greeks and you know there is a Greek-born gift and the Greeks got everything that they got out of Egypt because Europe is European. Even though they call themselves European for real, they are Asiatic. So these teachings that the Holy Prophet Noble Ali brought us, that's conducive to our growth and development, this is why he said nationality and divine creed. So later on down the line, when people start taking money to say that you Negro, colored, and black, you start taking money too saying that you're on the national side. When I opened up this meeting today, I said our divine and national movement. And Noble Ali had to bring the divine and national movement because we were 3/5 of a man. And when you're 3/5 of a man, I don't care what your religion is, but if you're 3/5 of a man, 2/5 are missing. And if 2/5 are missing, you're not whole. So now, in mathematics, 5/5 is a whole all day. So what Noble Ali did? He said, okay, you 3/5 of them, I'm going to bring you the other 2/5 to make you whole. 5/5 in mathematics all day is a whole. So he brought you your nationality, which is a 6, and he brought you your divine creed. So now we the 5. We 5/5. You're no longer 3. You 5 now because you have those other 2. So nationality is the divine creed, is the order of the day. And this is what took place. So when you look in the Bible, it talks about Jesus, and it talks about Juali. And when it talks about Juali, it talks about he have 1 foot on land, and he have 1 on sea. See? And then when you look in Revelations 10, and when you look at Genesis 10, it's talking about this book right here. And the reason why that is because Noble Ali gave it to us. And it's 101 questions. We call it the 101, which is the Last Supper. It's the high over the low, the rich over the poor, the wise over the ignorant, and truth over falsehood. And when you see the 7 that Noble Ali gave us, the 7 is in gold. And the reason why the 7 is in gold, not only do we have a divine creed, we have a nationality which makes us citizens. Ali said the citizens of all free national governments, according to the national constitution are all of one family bearing one free national name. He said those who fail to recognize the free national name of their constitutional government are classed as undesirables and is subject to all inferior names and abuses and mistreatment that the citizens care to bestow upon them. Now, we talk about citizenship there. He said that the citizens care to bestow upon them. Now, we got the gold I'll go back to. Now, I'm looking in the literature here, and Nova GRE tells us that the gold, the silver, and the commerce belong to the citizens alone. And without your national citizenship, by name and principle, you have no true wealth. So at this time, I'd like to read from chapter 46. And the title of this chapter is The Foundation of Christianity. Now, every time I think of Christianity, a European face always comes to my mind. Because there was a guy by the name Michelangelo. And Michelangelo was christened to paint a picture of Jesus. And he painted a picture of Jesus, and he used his family members. So now they got my Jesus looking like Ricky Nelson and Charleston Heston. So I want to read, and taking on my name. They buried my Jesus in Vatican Square, and they took on my name. So when you hear names, before I read it, when you hear names like King David, when you hear names like Solomon, see, because they talking about incest. And they saying that the Moabites came from Lot by going up into his two daughters. I got two daughters. I impregnated my two daughters. But I impregnated my two daughters upon the impregnable doctrine built upon love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice. And when I'm with my two daughters, I go within them, I go into them, I impregnate their minds with the truth. And this is what's going on right now with East and West and the North and the South and heaven and hell. So we're going to talk about citizenship, and we're going to talk about divine creed, because the whole world, they took my Jesus, they took my Abraham, they took Moses, they took Lot, they took Jesse, they took Obed, and they took everybody. Because you know Ruth's mother, or you know that Jesus' grandmother, name was Anna. And Anna was married to Joaquin. And Joaquin is one of the pillars. And Boaz is one of the pillars. So you're saying that Boaz's wife came through incest. And this is how they done took over your mind through mental slavery. So like I said earlier, they done took my Jesus, buried him in Vatican Square, and took all of our accomplishments. But the bad part about it, we talk about incest. And we talk about Sodom and Gomorrah. But guess what? When we heard about Sodom and Gomorrah, we got on the horses. So come on, man. I got a crew. We was Moors then. We wasn't Negro, black, and colored yet. We was known as Moors because everybody have a nationality. We descended of the ancient Moabites who inhabited the northwestern and southwestern shores of Africa. Now, who are the Moabites? They are the biblical sons and daughters of Ham, one of the three sons of Noah, according to the biblical scriptures. And this is why we are Hamitic by decent nature, by the way of life. So we're looking at Hamitic right here. I read it to you. But in the Bible, it says that his three sons were Shem, Ham, and Japheth. But if Ham is the cradle of civilization, how do Shem become the oldest son? Well, that is part of the Berlin Conference. Not only did they take our land, they took everything that was a part of us and claimed it to be their own. But we ain't mad at nobody, because Allah is love. And love is the only savior of the world. And Jesus, son of Mary, comes to manifest that love to man. So I'm going to read from this chapter again. because it's important that I do. But before I do, I'm going to go back to chapter 7 in this chapter, Divine Origin of the Asiatic Nation first. It says, the Turks are the true descendants of Hagar, who are the chief protectors of the Islamic creed, beginning from Muhammad I, the founder of the uniting of Islam by the command of the great universal God Allah. Now, the reason why I wanted to read that, because we was in Spain from 711 to 1492. But the Moors fought with the Ottoman Turks in 1453 to restore the Islamic creed, and it said right here that the Turks are the true descendants of Hagar, and you know that Hagar is the Egyptian. Hagar is the African. Hagar is the one that had a son named Ishmael, who is the founder of the holy city of Mecca. Because Sarah wanted to have children at that time. We'll talk about that later on, because her and Hagar went through something. They was beefing. And I don't blame her, but then she knew the lesson anyway. So I'm going to read the foundation of Christianity, and then we're going to talk about it. Because I see Abraham all over here. And we know that Abraham was not always Abraham. He first was Abram. And then once he found grace in the eyes of God, he become Abraham. I just like in the Moorish Science Temple of America. You find eels and you find babes. And they didn't have eels and babes on their name until they found grace in the eyes of God. And until you follow the divine constitution bylaw, the additional law, the questionable law, and the law that laid down to him by the prophet, you're still going to be a European. Because European is a thought pattern. See? We're not talking about no color scheme. We're talking about a thought pattern. Because thought is the cause of it all. Thought is rebirth. When a man changes his thinking, then he's born again. You know, when Jesus said, and was talking to Nicodemus, when he was telling Nicodemus, you must be born again. And Nicodemus said, must I go back through my mother's womb? He said, no, that which is of the flesh is of the flesh, and that which is of the spirit is of the spirit. So let me read this beautiful chapter that the prophet gave us for the world to hear. He said, hear and know that among the descendants of Africa, there's still much wisdom to be learned. Chapter 46, the beginning of Christianity. The foundation of Christianity began in Rome. Now, we know about the Rome. Who was Rome? You know who Rome is? Man, I remember I was coming up. I'm from the East Coast. And I was coming up. And every time we want to get some money, we go find the Romans. And who are the Romans? The Romans is the Italians. The same one crucified Jesus, and I'm wearing all these Roman clothes on me looking slick. He said the foundation of Christianity began in Rome. The Roman nation founded the first church of whom crucified Jesus of Nazareth was seeking to redeem his people from under the Roman yoke and law. What is the Roman yoke and law? The Roman yoke and law is the customs, the culture, the heritages, and the traditions of somebody else. That's why I know what you all say. We ought to worship under our own vine and fig tree and return to that state of mind of our forefathers, divine and national principle. Because you know what? Somebody done stole my birthright. And you're going to have to humble yourself and get back to God. Let me tell you why. My nephew's wife, my niece, she just passed on. And I'm getting ready to go to D.C. A lot going on. My birthday is here. I'm going to D.C. But the reason why I'm really happy to go to her homegoing, because a lot of times, through the teachings of the prophet Noah Ali and not the Christian church, the prophet told us, and I see it now. He said that there's three planes. There's the spirit, a soul, and the flesh. And they said once you leave this physical plane, you got to go to the plane of soul and complete a work there, and then go on to the spiritual plane. And a lot of times, it's hard to get there because you know how when you turn on your radio, You got to make sure it's on that right channel, that frequency, because if not, it's going to be a lot of static. So in order to get to heaven, before you get there, it's going to be a lot of static. But this sister, my niece, it was an honor to meet her because not only did she work with my nephew and my nephew worked with her, they begin to grow. They have a daughter that loves God and living his law, and they're trying to walk and talk with the Father. So when she leave here, she probably leave this physical plane. See, a lot of brothers, I remember one time I had a friend, and I seen him shoot 100 people. And he died the next week, and when we went to church, the preacher got up and said, well, Joe Blow is no longer here. He's gone on to a better place. Come on, man, that's not what we teach. Because you, many ages, man, gonna have to turn until all his lessons are learned. And until you overcome certain things on this plane of things made manifest as we are taught here in the Moorish Science Temple of America, as we are taught in our divine creed, we're saying that when you leave this plane, if you ain't ready for the plane of soul, if you haven't conquered the things down here that you need, you're going to come back. You're going to keep coming back until your lessons are done. That's why I said many ages. Man going to travel into the work. Even John the Baptist was the forerunner of Jesus. But it took John 18 years. John wrestled within the temple gate until he conquered self. Now, when we're talking about self, what you talking about? Because man have two selves. So we're not talking about the lower self because you got to crush the lower self. The lower self is the carnal self, is the body of desires, is a reflection of your higher self, but it's distorted by the murky ethers of the flesh. So let's look at that. We look at your higher self, and let's look at your lower self. Because we were talking about Noah's Ark. And they say on Noah's Ark they came 2 by 2. What are the 2 by 2 that came on Noah's Ark? Because this is known as the temple of God, but it's also known as the Ark of God. And they came 2 by 2. What are the 2 by 2? Your higher self and your lower self. Your positive thinking and your negative thinking. And you got to crush one and tame the other. So a brother asked me, how's your sales? I said, one of them chumps ain't doing nothing. But the other one is growing, trying to meet the great God, Allah. So let's read from this chapter because the title of my lesson today is the Bible. And it reads on this wise. Seeking to redeem his people in those days from the pressure of the pale-skinned nations of Europe, Rome crucified him according to their law. Then Europe had peace for a long time until Muhammad I came upon the scene and fulfilled the works of Jesus of Nazareth. See, now let's look at this. He said Muhammad came on the scene and fulfilled the works of Jesus. But you know what? When I look at Muhammad, who came on the scene to fulfill the works of Jesus, where was he from? Was he from Arabia? Because I learned through the biblical scriptures, you cannot tell me one prophet, not one. You cannot tell me one prophet that come out of Europe through scientific study and investigation. Because when you begin to talk about the Africans, you're talking about Ham. When you're talking about Shem, you're talking about the Japanese, the Vietnamese. And when you talk about Japheth, you're talking about Gog and Magog, the European nation. And I just finished teaching this. See? Because when you look at the Christians, you're looking at Gog and Magog. And when you look at Gog and Magog, they are the mischiefs of the universe. So Noble Jew Ali brought us this. And when he brought us this, people got kind of upset that Noble Jew Ali had brought us this information. So now up there in New York, they have a place called an island over there, Ellis Island. And when Noble Jew Ali came back to the island, all of them standing right there and said, where's that? Where's that? Where's that? It's right here. He said, I got it right here. because they did not want this information to be distributed to the public. That's just like right now. You find Moorish Americans, and you find a lot of Moorish Americans that don't study the biblical scriptures, don't study anything about their divine creed, but they'll go down to the courthouse. And when they go down to the courthouse, they'll go down there and tell them that they're Moorish Americans. And they want some paperwork, but they don't even know the Moorish American prayer. They don't even know anything about their divine creed. And in order to get back to God, you got to know your divine creed, because your divine creed is your spiritual just walking with God. And the only way you're going to leave this physical plane and go to the plane of soul, you got to have a connection with God. And this is what Noble Jew Ali brought us, because we've always been a praying people. Remember your great-grandmother? Remember your great-grandfather? They would always tell you that prayer changes things. Let me tell you something else about this Solomon Gomorrah. I had a friend of mine, older brother, a little older than me. He's my young brother, though. His name is Earl Coleman Bay. And when I was in D.C. last time, I met up with him. And I remember years ago, him and I had a conversation. And he said, man, my mother started talking to this guy. And this guy said something crazy to her. And what she did was she took all of the dishes, all of the plates, everything that this dude ever drunk out of and everything, and threw it in the trash. And I remember my mother told me when I was a child, she said, son, no matter what you do, never eat anything that get up and walk. So I'm saying, what this sister talking about, don't get up and eat nothing that don't get up and walk. And then my daughter's mother told me, she said, your sister told me that your mother said that your father have never seen her naked. And I didn't have nothing to think about, because I could understand that, because I remember we was coming up. Before integration, you meet a girlfriend. You got your girlfriend, she come in the room, and she cut the lights out, and she get under the cover, and you and her just get to singing and dancing and talking to one another. But now, they got movies and lights and stuff all up against the wall. You can look and see, because this comes out of you. This wasn't something that we was doing in Africa. This is something, that's why we had divine creed. Because can you imagine a Ruth and Boaz, or Jesus, or Mary's mother and Joseph, or Lot? Can you imagine them things, man, doing the same thing that we went up in the caves of Europe to tell them to stop doing? The same thing we went up in Europe to tell the Europeans to stop doing. Now they doing it, and they got our brothers and sisters doing it, and they think it's something slick. But we need to give back to Caesar what belongs to Caesar. So you got to give back that thought pattern. This is not the thought pattern of the Asiatic. There's certain things that we have to do. There's certain things that we have to perform. I remember when we was in India, because Jesus taught in India, Africa, and Europe. And because we have a few more that could do that too. We had brothers and sisters that was able to walk on nails. And the reason why they was able to walk on nails is because their spirituality was so strong that they could control the elements of the body. See, because when you begin to talk about the body, these are the attributes of this location here. See, the Jew Ali said, man is not the body nor the soul. He's a spirit and a part of Allah. Now, it's not in flesh to think. It's not in bones to reason. So how do you meet Allah? You meet Allah in the spirit of truth. And what is truth? Because Jew Ali told us about truth. He said, that's our second principle. He said, we love our brothers and sisters. That they live in love truth, that they live in truth, have peace, freedom will come to you, and justice is for us all. Love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice. These are the highest principles known to man. These are the principles that make you a Muslim. What makes you a Muslim is not how many times you bump your head on some ground. That's not what makes you a Muslim. I see a lot of brothers, I remember over the years, brothers get beating their head on the ground, so it'll be real black right here. So they say, man, he really praying. But see, what makes praying is a thought. Humbling yourself is a thought. When you humble yourself and do the right thing and humble yourself to the great God Allah, then that's when you become one with him. You become one with the great God Allah. The same thing with Ruth. Let's go back to Ruth, because if you put a T on Ruth, you get the truth. Ruth brought the truth. Now, I said it before, and I want to say it again because I'm talking about the Bible. When you begin to talk about being born again, it don't mean going back into your mother's womb. When you talk about coming close to God, that means in your spirit. That means in your elevation. That means in your understanding. Because the gifts of the understanding are the treasures of Allah. And he appointed to everyone his portion in what measure seemeth good unto himself. Have he endowed thee with wisdom? Have they enlightened thy mind with the knowledge of truth? Communicated to the ignorant for their instruction, communicated to the wise for thine own improvement. So when you look into these biblical scriptures, just like it comes from Egypt. Egypt, the capital empire of the dominion of a maxim, the first true and divine name. This is where this comes from. Now I know it's in the church. It's supposed to be in the church because they took it. But when you begin to talk about the Quran, or when you begin to talk about the Bible, both of these are two different religions. But now when you begin to talk about the Bible, and when you begin to talk about Christianity, there was a guy by the name of Martin Luther. And Martin Luther was a European that was a part of the Catholic Church. But he got to beefing. He got to beefing with the Pope and them, so he broke away. He broke away from the Catholic Church. And when he broke away from the Catholic Church, he formed his own thing. And what did he form? He formed a church called Lutheranism. And it's named after him. And from the Catholic to Lutheranism, then came Baptist, Protestant, Methodist, Presbyterian, etc. But that has nothing to do with the name, because you call it what you want to call it, but everybody in this Bible is someone that come out of the east. Know what you all say? From the east comes all light. Though the sun is hanging at high noon, the blind cannot see the light. The same as the Islamic creed brought to the Asiatics of North America by Prophet Noble Giraldi, who offered to those who were sick at heart, tried for many years, yet they are blind and cannot see the light. Nor is the prophet trying to put new wine in old skin, for he knows that it will burst them. Yet he has the remedy for the nation. The same remedy brought by Jesus, Muhammad, Buddha, and Confucius, which remedy is the truth. So now we're talking about Jesus, Muhammad, Buddha, and Confucius. Let's look at this 7 again. Because when you look at this 7, they have 4 breaks. And the 4 breaks in here remind me of Islamism. And the reason why it reminds me of Islamism, because these 4 breaks represent Jesus, it represents Muhammad, it represents Jesus, and it represents Confucius. And when we sit down in the upper room and get out of the public, it represents fire, water, earth, and air. The political aspect, the religious aspect, the social aspect, and the economical aspect. And it's a lot of other things that it represents. So Noble Giraldi, who is an Egyptian adept, was sent to us from the great God Allah, because he had to restore something upon us that was lost. In every era of time, when a nation is in need for a prophet, Allah will send one. So when you go back to Africa today, I don't care where you go, nobody knew anything, and the Europeans have wiped it from everybody's mind. Nobody knew anything about 7/11 and 1492. All that history was wiped away. But now you got a lot of eels and you got a lot of babes. I was with a brother the other day. Matter of fact, he was on my show the other week. And he was showing me some paperwork he had, because I just seen him flying 1 flag. And he wasn't flying 2 flags. But the 2 flags he fly the Moorish flag, then he have another flag that's red, and it has something like a green olive, some kind of branch in the middle. But then he has some paperwork. And when I looked at the paperwork that I looked at, it talked about the Moorish Science Temple of America. And I think that was so unfair. Because if you're not going to live according to the divine constitution and bylaw, the dictionary law, and everything that the Holy Prophet Noah Jew Ali told us to do, you shouldn't even be calling his name. You can't call yourself a Moorish American if you're not living according to what the prophet said. You see, and that right there can get you in trouble. It's not good. It's not good because Jew Ali said follow him to a destiny which is not uncertain, nor unknown. Let me finish reading this. Let me read from verse 5 now. It said the holy teachings of Jesus was to the common people, to redeem them from under the great pressure of the hands of the unjust, that the rulers and the rich will not oppress the poor. Also, that the lion and the lamb may lay down together and neither will be harmed when morning came. These teachings were not accepted by the rulers, neither by the rich, because they loved the principles of the 10 Commandments. Through the 10 Commandments, the rulers and the rich live while the poor suffer and die. The lamb is the poor people. The lion is the rulers and the rich. And through love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice, all men are one and equal to seek their own destiny and to worship under their own vine and fig tree after the principles of the holy and divine laws of their forefathers. All nations of the earth in these modern days are seeking peace. But there is but one true and divine way that truth may be obtained in these days, and it is through love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice being taught to all nations in all lands. Thus we just had a reading of the beginning of Christianity. So Noah Jew Ali, before he left, he had some other parts of this Moorish Quran. And he had to leave it with somebody. I used to talk to Sister Wilson Bay and German, but our brother used to tell me why he left it with a certain group of people. Because when Jew Ali was here, I mean, he was forced to make changes 100 times. And when those that was in the Masonic order and all these special orders, that's where he had his most trouble at. Even one of them told me, I'm back. He wasn't gone 7 days. Brother told me he's back. He's back. He ain't never went nowhere. That's why he said don't name your children Ali. Because he knew that because man is not the body nor the soul, somebody going to jump up and tell me I'm back. He never left. And the brother told me one time, and I had to teach a lesson. Noah Jew Ali told us something. He said if there should come agreement that cannot be settled by the head, he said notify him at once. Brother man, Jew Ali been gone since 1929. How can we notify him at once? Because we have a divine constitution and bylaws. We have dictionary laws. We have a constitution. We have all of the laws that he left us, and because they're divine, it don't change. Truth don't change. Don't need no apology, and it can't even be altered. Really? I don't need a black law dictionary. I don't need none of that foolishness. And yeah, I had 100 of them in Temple 2 and passed them out. And the reason why we don't need that is because you already done it. He already took care of all of this. All you have to do is follow the prophet. And the way you follow the prophet is living according to love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice. Whenever a nation is in need for a prophet, Allah will send one. And in this Arab time, Allah had to send Jew Ali. You know, if a camel had a guard, his guard would have a hump. So in this Arab time, Allah had to send Jew Ali. And the reason why he had to send Jew Ali, he couldn't have sent Prophet Muhammad or somebody that's of Arabia, because he had to send somebody to us that looked like us, that lost what we lost, which was our nationality and our divine creed, to hook us back up with the family of nations. Because everybody knows that the Moors, we had a flag. In 1913, Noah Jew Ali gave us a flag, and this flag that he gave us was not even being flown in the UN. They took the flag down. The French flag was flying in Morocco, And the reason why the French flag was flying in Morocco up until 1956, because the people that's in Morocco right now is French. Look at them. They don't look nothing like an African. Look at Arabia today. Hagar's son Ishmael is the father of the Arabian nation, but look at him. This is a part of the Berlin Conference. See? And this thing is so sweet. How do I know? I've been teaching this stuff for 50 years. In my highs and my lows. See? And it's the truth. All you have to do is investigate. See? Allah never made a heaven for man. He never made a hell. We are creators and make our own. So in this book, 101 questions, G. Ali asked us a question. He said, when was the head of Satan taken off? It's a 1453 Byzantine, by whom? By Muhammad. And we look at this, and the first place we go is to Arabia. But this is not the Muhammad, because ain't no Muhammad going to be born in 570, and we know he passed in 632, but this says 1453. So we're talking about two different Muhammads, and we're talking about two different nationalities, but when you look right here at this chapter, it says Hagar, Japanese and Chinese, and then it says the Turks are the descendants of Hagar. And this is just letting you know that Noble G. Ali hooked us back up with the family of nations. And it's so beautiful because Africa is the cradle of civilization, and everything comes through you and me. So I wanted to talk about the Bible today because some people that have been talking to some Ethiopians and other people, they're saying that Christianity come out of Africa because of the Bible. The Bible came out of Africa, and people stole the Bible and put their name on it and made Martin Luther and all this other stuff. But the foundation of Christianity began in Rome, not Africa. And it was the Roman nation that founded the first church, of whom crucified Jesus. Now, when they say crucified Jesus, how did they crucify him? Some of them say they hung him on a nail. Some of them say they crucified, but why? Why crucify Jesus? Because he's telling the people of a heavenly kingdom and not an earthly kingdom. So in all the world, there are two things. There's a positive force and there's a negative force. Your higher self is your positive force. Your lower self is your negative force. And which one is you with? You can't serve two masters at the same time. You got to love one and despise the other. And we done got caught up into a web that we know nothing of, because we got to start honoring our father. Now, who is your father? If you say honor your father and your mother, who is your father? Your father is the great God of the universe. He has many names. Some call him Yahweh, Thor, them, God, Allah, but he's the causeless cause, the rootless root from which all things have gone. So we got to be part of God. We got to be of that spirit. It say try the spirit, test the spirit, and see are you from the same spirit. So are you from that same spirit? Who are you? See, he said we're Asiatic Muslim. And we're Asiatic Muslim because there's two formulations. There's Asiatic and there's European. And I'm not sure I'm not European, I'm Asiatic. And I'm Muslim because I submit my will to Allah. And the way that you submit your will to Allah is just like the Christians. When they live according to the fruits of the Spirit, or just like the Muslims, when they live according to the Kalima Shahada, and just like in the Moorish Science Temple, when we live according to love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice, we are walking with God. We are living with God. Because if we are spirit and a part of God, then how do we meet him? We meet him in the spirit of truth. And truth is the only thing that changes not. So I want to read one more thing, and then this show, and in chapter 39, 43, verse 19, it says, reflection is the business of man. A sense of his state is his first duty. But who remembered himself a boy? Remember when you was a boy? Remember before you didn't know the things that you know now? You know what? It's something in your spirit that had God to even keep you around this long. You are here for a reason. Nothing happened by chance or accident. So the best thing to do is try to become one with our Father, God Allah, so we can leave this physical plane and don't have to come back here no more. But if you still doing the things of the world, I mean, they're agents. You're going to have to keep going over and over. Now, a friend of mine just come home. Been in a long time. But evidently, his good outweighed his bad. So you have a good nature and a bad nature. And just like we gone and some come, God has us here for a reason. So we need to get in tune with God. We need to get in touch with Allah. Let's say Allah today, because we call him Allah. But guess where Allah live at? I'm going to tell you where Allah lives. You got two hands, you got two legs, and you got a head. A-L-L-A-H. He lives within you. And when you live according to your higher self, you are the attributes of God. You are pattern for God. Because it said man need a pattern for his life. He loved to follow and not to lead. And the man who stands upon the corners of the path and points the way, but does not go, is just a pointer. And a block of wood can do the same. So it's another chapter that I want to speak on that the Noble Drew Ali brought up. And this chapter is the end of time and the fulfilling of the prophecy. And this chapter here is the last chapter in the Moorish Holy Quran, but it's one that the Holy Prophet had to bring. And it goes on this wise. The last prophet in these days is Noble Drew Ali, who was prepared divinely in due time by Allah to redeem men from their sinful ways and warn them of the great wrath which is sure to come upon the earth. John the Baptist was the forerunner of Jesus in those days, to warn and stir up the nation, to prepare them to receive the divine creed which will be taught by Jesus. In these modern days, there came a forerunner who was divinely prepared by the great God Allah, and his name is Marcus Garvey, who did teach and warn the nations of the earth to meet the coming prophet, who was to bring the true and divine creed of Islam, and his name is Noble Drew Ali, who was prepared and sent to this earth by Allah to teach the old-time religion and the everlasting gospel to the sons of men, that every nation shall and must worship under their own vine and fig tree, and return to their own and be one with their Father, God Allah. The Moorish Science Temple of America is a lawful, chartered, and incorporated organization. In its subordinate temple that desires to receive a charter, the Prophet has them to issue to every state throughout the United States, etc., that the world may hear and know the truth, that among the descendants of Africa there is still much wisdom to be learned in these days for the redemption of the sons of men under love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice. We, as a clean and pure nation, descendants from the inhabitants of Africa, do not desire to amalgamate or marry into the family of the pale-skinned nations of Europe, neither serve the gods of their religion, because our forefathers are the true and divine founders of the first religious creed for the redemption and salvation of mankind on earth. Therefore, we are returning the church and Christianity back to the European nations as it was prepared by their forefathers for the earthly salvation, while we, the Moorish Americans, are returning to Islam, which was founded by our forefathers for our earthly and our divine salvation. I'll close out. Allah, the Father of the universe, the Father of love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice. Allah is my protector, my guide, and my salvation, by night and by day, through his holy prophet, Drew Ali. Amen. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it